Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Julia Bryan-Wilson, Associate Professor of Modern and Contemporary Art here at UC Berkeley. After such an invigorating day of panels, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, Ralph Lemon. Ralph has been a pioneer of cross-disciplinary practice since he got his start in the Midwest, co-founding Mixed Blood Theater in Minneapolis in 1976, and continues to be a much sought-after dancer, choreographer, and conceptual artist whose work interrogates how translation happens across words, objects, and movements. In the past few decades, he has worked with the likes of Meredith Monk, Alvin Ailey, and Jacob's Pillow, as well as creating the influential Ralph Lemon Dance Company. His groundbreaking choreography has garnered him a Bessie and an American Choreographer's Prize. These are only some of his laurels, which also include a Guggenheim, a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, a USA Artists Fellowship, and the Alpert Award. It was actually announced just yesterday that Ralph has been chosen to join a select group of inaugural winners of the Doris Duke Performing Artists Award, which is great. Congratulations. Yeah, I had to keep updating the bio as new information was sort of streaming across the news radar. Ralph has truly expanded our understanding of what contemporary dance looks like by integrating the use of projected film, live narration and dialogue, documentary, and sounds that range from Mozart to Belle and Sebastian. He has been commissioned to produce work for the Walker Art Center and has performed in venues such as the Brooklyn Academy of Music and the Museum of Modern Art, where in October he will curate a 3-week performance series called Some Sweet Days, featuring Steve Paxton, Jerome Bell, Dean Moss, and Deborah Hay, among others, which sounds totally amazing. In 2010, at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Ralph presented his epic, How Can You Stay in the House All Day and Not Go Anywhere?, a multimedia event that was the culmination of an 8-year collaboration with a 102-year-old former sharecropper from Mississippi. Currently, he is the artistic director of Cross Performance in New York City. Ralph is also an inspiring writer, and his book, Geography, Art, Race, Exile, in which he discusses travel, diaspora, and performance, was published by Wesleyan University Press in 2000. And here is a sample passage from his website. Quote, "Okay, let's say that art, as most of us like to consider it, is beyond the mire of a soul's unfiltered messiness. But art, as I appreciate it, is also not confined to transformation. It does not triumph over all. Sometimes, at its best, it sits in shit, nonfiction, and poor, and also possibly fake," end quote. As we trundle through our days, barely pausing to look up from our screens, Ralph's work reminds us of the profound capacity of the physical body to tell stories, to shit, to fake, to fail. What is more, he recognizes that there is not an opposition between screens and bodies, but a constant interplay, even, we might say, a dance. For him, gesture is a conduit for history, and those histories shape and remake how we move through time. So please join me in welcoming Ralph Lemon, and just to clarify what will happen, Ralph is going to do a kind of performative lecture slash event. I don't know if we can categorize it. Whatever it is, it will be amazing, I'm sure. And then there will be a response by Joe Good, and then we're going to all adjourn. There won't be a Q&A. We will go outside for a champagne toast to kind of continue the conversation outside, which is, I'm sure, where we all would love to be.
I had thought about maybe sitting like this because I didn't want you to be sort of distracted by my sourcing the Spalding Gray, because I have to sit at the table, because there's a light, because I didn't want to sit at the podium. But I'm sitting on a little angle just so I can kind of see the film. So that's, again, it's thought about very practically. And since we've been really obviously working on being very precise with our language, this is not really a performance. And it's not a lecture. I think about it today as some present thinking with visuals. I think that's about all. Oh, it starts with 2 prologues. Merce Cunningham once said about my work, Ralph Lemon knows how to start a dance. I'm not sure he knows how to finish one. He was half right. I don't really know how to start one either. So the work begins with a couple prologues, and that's as much as I'll say. Okay. So we'll have the lights first. And Laura. Fiction. Fiction and nature are arranged in a particular way in the empiricist world. Left to itself, the mind has the capacity to move from one idea to another, but it does so at random, in a delirium that runs throughout the universe, creating fire dragons, winged horses, and monstrous giants. The principles of human nature, on the other hand, impose constant rules on this delirium, laws of passage, of transition, of inference, which are in accordance with nature itself. But then a strange battle takes place. For if it is true that the principles of association shape the mind by imposing on it a nature that disciplines the delirium or the fictions of the imagination, conversely, the imagination uses these same principles to make its fictions or its fantasies acceptable and to give them a warrant they wouldn't have on their own. In this sense, it belongs to fiction to feign these relations, to induce fictive ones, and to make us believe in our follies. We see this not only in the gift fantasy has of doubling any present relation with other relations that don't exist in a given case, but especially in the case of causality. Fantasy forges fictive causal chains, illegitimate rules, simulacra of belief, either by conflating the accidental and the essential, or by using the properties of language to substitute for the repetition of similar cases actually observed. A simple verbal repetition that only simulates its effect. It is thus that the liar believes in his lies, by dint of repeating them. Education, superstition, eloquence, and poetry also work in this way. One no longer goes beyond experience in a scientific way that will be confirmed by nature itself and by a corresponding calculus. One goes beyond it in all the directions of a delirium that forms a counter-nature, allowing for the fusion of anything at all. Substituting the traditional concept of error with the concept of delirium or illusion, illegitimate exercises of faculties, illegitimate functioning of relations. In this, we are not threatened by error, rather we bathe in delirium. Those of us that have the privilege to complicate, or shall we say obfuscate, our cultural bodies in politics, we make some kind of art, or we embody something because we have to and call it whatever we want to call it. These things that we then call something, a lecture, theater, performance, an event, an installation, cyberactive media, reconstituted tears, mourning. These things could now land anywhere. Inhabit a backyard, a supermarket, a cave, a bedroom, a lake, the sky. Does it matter? In most confined ideological traditions, the approach to spirit is perceived as elevation, as getting rid of the burden of weight, of the gravitating force which binds us to earth, as cutting links with material inertia and starting to float freely. We are mired in matter and its inert density until we are not. Abandoning place. To be might mean not to inhabit, and yet the medium of spirit is the ground, us on the ground, heading towards some ground, looking at the ground, thinking about spirit. This privilege is not innocent. There must be rules. We should be careful. Our weather is always someone else's weather. I'd like to discuss my dance practice today, and since I will not be dancing, I'll begin by talking about the body. In the body, movement, my performance compositions, whatever it is I call these things, the preparation, the flying, the falling, the discoveries, the distresses, the protests, have to do with emotive connections, something felt, discovered. This, now this, that. What the fuck is that? This feels right. This is not right. Now I'm really lost. Emotional weather. Intuition is only intelligence speeding, I have heard. There's also the body as a vehicle for an expression of energy, just that, unless, of course, energy invents and feigns, which would allow for anything at all. With the body, there's really only the language of movement, elusive, corporeal, ephemeral. The body is a vehicle for culturally inscribed a movement, play, language, almost anything at all. Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra, the primary revivalist of Odissi dance in the 40s in India, said about his dancing, "I don't actually dance, but play in compassion, and spectators say that this form is dancing." I wish I completely believed in my capacity to play in compassion. However, my doubts seem to be useful. And then there's all the other stuff that goes along with the body and its doubts. I like how it is impossible to be abstract with the body, as one can also get lost in the body, becoming anything, a film, a photograph, a drawing, a sculpture, a theft, an escape. We were talking about Steve Paxton the other day, David Gordon and I, and David said, Steve doesn't really dance, choreograph. He inhabits movement. And where else might that reside beyond the body and be accurate, I wondered. What other new opportunities for some kind of shelter, a shelter or container, porous or ephemeral, a place to live, flourish, hide in? Merce Cunningham and John Cage offered that time and space are illusion. Bachelard spoke to the imagined poetry dreams of space-time. Paul Virilio, in his Aesthetics of Disappearance, speaks to human space becoming that of no one, becomes progression of nowhere. Whenever I quote that phrase, I'm asked to repeat it. Human space becoming that of no one becomes progression of nowhere. He also says the pursuit of form is only a technical pursuit of time. I like Virilio. I think he's funny. I like how this could not be a movie. It certainly is an inexplicable and unbelievable beginning to a movie. This is the most beautiful thing that Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra ever said, in my opinion. The real dance must convey the feeling of undivided existence, that a spectator can feel that he, she is not different from the thing observed. I enjoy thinking that this really isn't a dance, or that this is the last dance I will ever try to make. Watch how it continues to fall apart before it ever becomes anything comprehensible to look at, unnaturally present, like the most emphatic nature. It was not supposed to be about anger, rage, look like that. And I asked them time and time again to try and be quiet. I wanted to make a non-dance, maybe an anti-dance about ecstasy, an absolute dance. Obviously, we hadn't gotten there. Still, I was quite entertained by the whole thing, especially the noise. We were dancing with ghosts. She was a ghost to me and I was a ghost to her, so we were there but not really there, as perhaps memory, someone that had been forgotten. I think that duet's about a certain kind of relationship. It's a movement work for two people. This is absolutely not a dance at all. Myself and but I and others had to frame or shelter it as one. We seem to have no other choice. Explores a variety of physical and This is a web trailer that the Museum of Modern Art put together.
It's like a reduction.
And this is a letter I wrote to a friend about whatever this was, explaining what I thought
in the body.
happened.
And also kind of grace.
Finished my tour with the last dance that I may have ever made, and then went away to sleep in Costa Rica, and then returned to New York for the MoMA project. It was wild, so wild, and strange. The love story between the duet you saw at St. Mark's Dance Space in 2008, the memorial event, which was supposed to be performed just that one time, well, it was transformed into a drunken dumb show, quoting Allen Ginsberg. Remapped into
movement.
What a beautifully impossible space,
Solaris
the
was
atrium.
definitely
Wrong,
really,
right,
really
wrong,
rich.
especially at 3 p.m. in the
Solaris
afternoon.
is about
the audiences,
kind of how
dance
memory
folk,
resides in
visual
your
art
body
folk,
and
surprise tourists, museum guards,
it's so
babies
shifty
screaming were
and
packed
alive.
around Oakley and I as we tried to stay
We
focused
tried to,
and really
if not
quiet.
ignore each other,
After Oakley finished
work with
wailing, of
each other
course.
in a kind of simultaneous space
It was a
and
perverse
time,
iteration of the
sensing each
original
other
version.
energetically, emotionally.
I'm happy I did it,
even,
though. It felt like starting
smell.
over, like I didn't know where I was or what I
There's
was
not a lot
doing,
of looking
what I
at
was
each
good at. At my age, it was a gift.
And then there
a
are moments in
brutal
the
gift.
work where there are collisions.
The MoMA government was thrilled with the whole performance series, the way it
Those
energized the
collisions just kind of
space.
create
They want to
a
do
kind of
more
reminder
performance and
that
dance
there
now.
is something there,
I think
but we're
that's
not
a
quite
good
sure
thing,
who that is.
although my show and the other dance performances created quite a
leaving that
stir
part open,
argument
you know,
within our
the
small
exact
downtown dance
kind of
world about
formation of our
co-optation and whether or not a
We're not
dance
lovers,
should
we're
be
not
experienced
like,
in a controlled
a
viewing
man or a
environment
woman.
or in
I
a
mean,
noisy,
physically, that's
barely
kind of what
manageable
what someone
hybrid
might see from
situation.
an audience
Blah,
point of view.
blah,
But
blah.
I think in the way we're inhabiting the space.
Ah,
way
the
we're
tyranny
sharing it,
of what seems to
it's
be
really
external.
kind of an energetic exchange. I think in this work you see a lot of sort of a very vast emotional landscape where things are kind of changing all the time and they're never one thing. I think that's important. I think how we live, who we are, and what we're capable of is quite vast, and at the same time sort of simple, you know, and in that sense emotional.
Paradance, a cribbing of Gerard Genet's term of the textuality surrounding an actual text, paratext, introduction, appendage, book jacket blurbs, expository articles. But since dance movement is so physically manifested, unlike textuality, paradance is in a sense more interesting as it has to transcend more rigidly defined boundaries. This is an artifactual representation of some of where the earlier imagined final dance and non-dance memorial redux came from, 4 years before all the crying, some of the other stuff in questions, marks, a personal and private practice made public, curated in a familiar, recognizable kind of space, another official modern muse place, D-Live. Certainly not as magical a space as the Tarkovsky movie, the one that came 6 years before the Solaris love story, the movie I wish was not a movie, and then it would be even more inexplicable. Still, it is almost perfect, the never-explained prologue to Andrei Rublev, some medieval Daedalus storming the heavens, a winged architect in his airship before crashing to the ground. And when the horse dances at the very end, I feel like I am not different from the thing observed. I draw almost every day, acquiring more intelligence with contingency. The emphatic playfulness that comes along with uncertainty interests me a lot. A young James Baldwin, a 13-year-old child dressed and placed in the 19th century, sometimes also wearing a bunny suit. Later becoming a 100-year-old man named Walter, wearing a spacesuit, because I can draw whatever I want. The drawings perhaps have nothing to do with the performance work, and in that respect they ground them because of their privacy. Paradances, movement sketches, a record of something else, or a simple practice, nothing more, who knows? It involves a particular currency of attention, a combination of body, mind, object, and action, with no regard to the order in which they are attending the doing. It is a good argument, this production of appearances. A very good argument in an array of costume subterfuge. A 100-year-old man from Mississippi, me in a rabbit suit, possibly representing James Baldwin as Brer Rabbit, both unreliable narrators. In 1995, I began an interesting performance travel research called Geography, an aesthetic and cultural tourism of sorts. I worked and traveled to parts of Africa, Asia, and the American South. At the end of this very interesting performance discourse in the field on the stage, I met Mr. Walter Carter, the oldest man in Yazoo City, Mississippi, a muse place for sure, a live one. Walter became the translator of all that I had learned in the puzzle of geography. He helped break down an empirical dancing body in theater art space, a complete collapse, actually. I'd like to read to you from one of our first mapped out collaborations. It took place in 2003. My daughter Chelsea plays the other observer, my art partner in this adventure. She and I are the we. It was raining. We went scouting at Family Dollar for some of the items on our list. Car grease, screwdriver, large ceramic vase, ceramic rabbit, almost any size, a 10-foot rope, 4 or 5 old vinyl albums with jackets from the 60s or 70s, a baseball bat, a watering can. As you can see, the third item is missing. I think it was a plastic lawn chair. I immediately sensed the beginning drastic, culturally specific translation of our event. Family Dollar had its own confounding item list, stock, and clientele. There were no ceramic rabbits, but there were 6-inch round ceramic basketball banks. No rope, but there was white, purple, and blue plastic shiny cord and a 10-foot black speaker wire. No baseball bats, not even the plastic kind. Surprisingly, there were large ceramic vases, Egyptian blue. I assumed Walter already had a chair, a metal wash basin, an empty soup can, and an old baseball bat discarded somewhere. We also shopped for phone cards. I bought one, but later discovered that the checkout woman neglected to activate it. "Hello, may I speak to Edna?" "Hold on," a young girl yelled, almost too fast to perceive, and then it sounded like she dropped the phone. Edna is Walter's second wife, his caretaker, although she always says he's getting around a lot better than she is, him being 20 years or so her senior. "I got to go to the beauty parlor tomorrow, early as I can. Don't know when I can be back. You know hairdressers. You got to wait to make an appointment, and then you got to wait to get your hair fixed, and then you got to wait to see what they did. And all the talking in between. Hard to say when I'll be back. Just can't say." "What time you think you'll leave your house?" I tried to calculate, imagine how many hours she was unfolding. And she said, "Oh, maybe 9:30. It takes me a while to get dressed and out the house. Walter gets around better than I do these days." "Well, call us once you finish with the hairdresser, and maybe we can meet you on your way back home on the hill. The gas station in Little Yazoo. We'll wait by the phone." "If you say so." Sounds crazy to me, but if you say so. I'll call y'all once I'm done with the hairdresser. Walter lived somewhere in between Bentonia and Yazoo City, near Little Yazoo, down and around quite a few small indistinct dirt roads. It was impossible to visit Walter without Edna, driving halfway to meet us on Highway 49 on the hill at the gas station in Little Yazoo. So I made a plan to wait by the phone the next day for as long as it took. January 6th. It was 10 a.m. and I looked at my haunting score. It seemed outrageously cryptic. I wondered what actually could be done, that is, if Edna called. If Edna did call, I assumed much of the day would be spent hashing out in person what could actually be done with Walter. Waiting, looking out of the window of my motel room, there's a great open field nestled behind the Best Western. Long, sweeping brown grass and a few dark spots of large sinkholes. A dozen tiny new pine trees popping at different spots around the sinkholes, at different heights, even in the bright cold. And young occasional deer appearing and then disappearing. The Gujarat Indian proprietors have a sizable garden directly behind the building. Greens, herbs, peppers asleep and winterized. It goes well with the adjoining open field, all of which was sinking. Okay, Edna, call. Call. I waited. At 1 p.m. I called again, another new voice, a young woman disarmingly polite, Lawanda. They're in Yazoo City. My grandmother's getting her hair done. Not sure when they'll be back. It takes a while, usually 2 hours. They? Walter went to the hairdresser with her? Yes. What time did they leave the house? Oh, about 12:45. They should be back by 3:30. Damn, I thought to myself. Sunsets at 5. I hate driving through the dark pitch woods of Mississippi at night. My eyes, it's my bad eyes that hallucinate. Our motel room also started to sink, stuck there, waiting. Edna called at 2:30. Ralph, we're back home, finally back home, and I'm sure tired. Could we still come by today? I didn't give her any time to answer. Oh, well, we're ready to go. We can meet you at the gas station in 15 minutes. There was a long pause. Boy, you drive fast, she giggled. I'm gonna need a little time. 20 minutes. Half an hour. We pulled up alongside Edna's dark blue 81 Chrysler. Walter was in the front passenger seat, seemingly asleep, until he saw us and then bright-eyed opened the car door and almost ran to where we were parked. Not really a run, no, not even almost, more like a broken, wobbly hop, mastered. I hugged Walter, felt his frailness, the jacketed bones, that of a young boy, a teenager. I asked Edna if it was okay for Walter to ride with us. Walter was already in the front passenger seat of our car. Mr. Carter, where do you actually live? What's it called? Yazoo City, Little Yazoo, Bentonia, Oil City? Ain't got no name. I live in the country, he said proudly. As it turned out, we had plenty of time and daylight and rode. Driving with Walter through these woods felt very familiar. I checked to see that his seatbelt was secured on. So, Walter, I have these things I'd like you to do for a video play I'm directing. Simple tasks, things we do every day that seem ordinary but that are in fact sacred. But we don't know that they are sacred, but maybe some of us do. As important to our lives as prayer, whatever we pray to, and we all pray, but don't maybe recognize we're praying until we find something, and then have to think about what it is we found. Something like that. Anyway, it's about you and me. I'll do them first, the task, and then you'll do them however you remember them. I'll do them my way, and you'll do them your way, and you can make as much noise as you want, and then we'll rethink what it was we just did and call them events, because events sounds more determined than task. And let's make sure whatever we come up with is somewhat accidental. Yes, aleatoric events. That's not what I really said. This is what I actually said to Walter on the way to his house. Walter, it's so good to see you. I'm going to be here a few days and would like to visit you, come by every day and talk, do a little documentary, videotape, take some photographs. I can't believe you're still alive. Walter, excited, hearing what little he hears, yelled, yeah, sure, anytime. Going in, he screamed once we were out the car, rushing us into a small brick house, 1856 Cessna Road, the address on his mailbox. We sat in his dark front room, catching up, admiring Edna's new flapper 20s hairdo. There was a long conversation about their grandkids, Walter's from another marriage and Edna's from another marriage, how many they might have, and if they should count the dead ones. LaWanda and Dolores were brought into the conversation, and after a while, everyone concluded that there were 12 grandkids maybe between them and untold great-grandkids. There were 2 great-grandkids present, LaWanda's kids, Trey Derek Marquis, who I thought was a little girl, who must have been the little boy who yelled too fast and dropped the phone a few calls back, and Mimi, a beautiful dark 4-year-old with a great smile and 6 tiny gold front teeth. We took a walk, scouted his yard, and discovered these possible event item translations. A broken dangling basketball hoop in a tree, an old sardine can. How about those wash basins, Walter, or what, he said? Like that, I said, pointing to 3 metal tubs hanging from a shed. Oh, them is tin tubs. Yep, got 3. A large empty soldering gas tank, a hose to replace the watering can, a wheelbarrow without a wheel, a chewed-off deer leg. White boys, he said, hunters, and then the dogs got to it. A shovel, and he said he could dig a hole. At some point in the walk, Walter tripped and fell completely flat into his stomach. He quickly stumbled back up to his feet in a body language I'd never seen, like he was reminded down there that down there was waiting. He stood, shaking a little, and brushed himself off, embarrassed. I ain't fallen like that in a long time, he repeated, twice. January 7. Chelsea and I drove back from Jackson with a porcelain rabbit in hand and 478 records from a flea market, but no baseball bat. Other than the baseball bat and car grease, it seemed we had everything we needed for the rest of the week. We met up with Walter in his house after we returned from church. Edna let us in. We found Walter in his bedroom, lying across his bed, fully clothed and asleep. He heard us at his door and woke up immediately, as though sleep were always present but never deep enough to keep him away from the vigilance of being alive, something numinous like that. The plan was to drive Walter to the spot of the old plum tree where Jerry was hung 90 years ago, but unbeknownst to us, Walter had other plans. As soon as we were all in the car, Walter told us we needed to do some other things first. What about the tree, I asked, a little shocked. Later, he mumbled. Walter sat in the front passenger seat and in a remarkable vocal calling matching the speed of our car's velocity, rattled off which race lived, owned which set of grass hills, trees, and skyline on either side of the many roads we ventured. That's colored, that's white, white, that one's colored, that used to be white, now it's colored, white on both sides, white on both sides. This went on for 20 miles or so, obsessive, speeding up and slowing down with the pace of the car. We turned a corner and then it started again. A profound vocal marker of nondescript landscape, and rarely, almost never, were there a distinct house, yard, car, truck, person in sight. First stop, he told us, was his grandson's property and trailer pub, where Walter was surreptitiously given a pint of Seagram 7. He also asked for any old baseball bat that might be lying around the property. His grandson looked around his property and in his truck, but found nothing. Yeah, we need a bat, and they're going to have me digging a hole with my shovel, Walter gamely announced. Then we were off to his oldest daughter's house, who he hadn't seen since the new year, who's a beauty at 70. He just wanted to say hello. At the end of the day, he finally directed us to the place where Jerry was hung. What I'd been expecting, planned since morning, since 2002, when I heard the story for the first time. Pull off the road over here, he directed. He got out of the car and fell again, backwards, sliding against the car door, but didn't seem to notice this time, not even the dirt on his shirt. Got up, didn't brush himself off, and hurried to a nondescript place off a side road. One would have to imagine it, the historical place and scene 90 years ago. There was a trace of something there, depending on who's looking. I could imagine a tree hanging over the road and a body hanging in the tree, a different road, a different sky. I imagined it because there was not much there except a dirt road, and off the road a little gully surrounded by wild grass. Walter also diverted any memorial or counter-memorial sentiment by reminding us that it happened a long time ago when he was a little boy, and how he and his friends were never going to play in that tree again, and what a shame that was. And now the tree is completely gone, and so are all his friends. Walter was actually more interested in talking about the field across the road where he had first picked cotton as a teenager. The day began cloudy, overcast. We began the first event. We knocked on Walter's bedroom door. He was sitting in a worn tan velveteen lounge chair next to his bed and window watching television, a Western. I told Walter that today we'd videotape some more, but no lynching site this time, no traveling, just him in his backyard moving stuff around, and instead of a baseball bat, we'd use a brick, any old brick. Event number 1, the music of breaking rabbits, or how to dig the wrong hole. Walter carried the shovel, walked into the scene of the event, a space in his backyard behind 2 leaning sheds with interesting yard debris cluttered all around. A large empty soldering gas tank, a big pile of colorful wires, a wheelbarrow without a wheel, a large empty Kwanzaa detergent can, a chewed-off deer leg. Walter then walked down a slight hill from the 2 leaning sheds and began to dig a hole, and found 3 buried 78 records unjacketed. He retrieved the records, brushed them off, dropped them one at a time back up the slight hill, marking his path to a sitting tin tub. He paused. He reached into the tin tub and retrieved a set-in-place screwdriver and sardine can filled with Crisco cooking grease. He took the screwdriver and can filled with Crisco to a blue Egyptian vase standing on a work table with a brick resting in its mouth. He smeared the Crisco onto the vase with the screwdriver, greasing it up and down with a vertical action. He repeated this action quite a few times. Once finished, he placed the sardine can filled with Crisco and the screwdriver down onto the table and took up a nearby green glass water pitcher filled with water, carried it to the tin tub, poured the water into the tin tub. He paused. Still holding on to the empty green pitcher, he walked over to the vase with the brick and took the brick from the mouth of the vase. Carrying the brick in the pitcher, he walked to the tin tub and pulled it a few feet closer to a porcelain rabbit sitting nearby. He moved to a stance directly next to the rabbit, agilely knelt, and with the brick smashed the porcelain rabbit. He stood and paused, holding the empty pitcher, dangling the cabled brick in the other hand. He dropped the brick. He picked up the broken porcelain rabbit pieces scattered on the ground and placed them in an empty pitcher. He carried the pitcher full of broken porcelain rabbit pieces down the slight hill to the freshly dug hole and buried the broken pieces. The event ended with Walter standing over the grave of the broken rabbit, holding the shovel, using it as a natural rest prop for a very long time. The event did not go as planned. We started with another score, one that made more sequential sense to me, but Walter forgot certain things and enacted as much of my suggestions as he could remember, doing the event his way. When we finished 3 hours later, Walter sat down in a white plastic lawn chair, panting a little, humming. "So, Walter, how was it?" "I don't know. I broke a rabbit and dug a hole." I still don't know," he mumbled. For the next day's work, we talked about trying another event iteration. I also proposed that we should look at the video of the work done thus far to get his approval or not. "I don't care," he responded. "Don't need to know. It's nice, the work. It's nice. I'll sleep tonight." And then after being paid, he said, "Money on Monday is good luck." On Tuesday, it was supposed to rain, January 9, and rain it did. Event number 2, Recording Rain. We gathered all the recovered unburied 78 records from yesterday's work, now mostly broken in several pieces, these emblems of broken memory, history, and brought them inside to the screened-in porch and documented Walter putting all the parts back together puzzle-like, with wide gray electrical tape and scissors, using the top of his white porch freezer as a workstation. Those were the only suggestions given. His own setup this time. We also provided a dainty little clamp work light with a 40-watt bulb bought at another dollar store, this time a Fred's dollar store. He took 26 minutes, took his time, deliberate, getting 3 records fairly reconfigured, and the 4th, How Many Times by Orrin Tucker with orchestra, interestingly abstract. Destruction and the impossibility of recovery in the abstract. Creation out of sheer exhaustion, I also thought. After taping them all back together, he looked at his work, delirious. Grace may in fact be the absolution of a seam, invisible and whole. Suspension of the known, the inconnu, beyond the given, ungivable, just there, that elegant. And it needs an audience, requires some kind of witnessing, even as it is perhaps unseeable, cutting links with material inertia and starting to float freely. I bet he thought these things to himself, that it was perfect. And then he put them in a neat stack and carried them outside, delicately placing them on the ground in the rain.
Wow, thank you. I'm going to respond to the text that Ralph sent me. I hadn't seen this until just now. I don't respond that fast. So, first I want to start by thanking Ralph Lemon for this beautiful work, but also for showing such leadership and initiative in his dismantling of some of the unspoken boundaries that have enclosed dance and kept it in a rather airless little room. He is one of a handful of artists working in the U.S. who has stepped bravely out of the comfort zone of making tourable choreography that fits neatly onto the proscenium stage, and he has ventured into new territory that undoubtedly will open doors for other artists who want to view themselves as cross-disciplinary and to approach their work in a new way. I want to thank ARC and Shannon Jackson, my colleague, for inviting me to participate in this roomy topic of art and time. I have been excited in the past couple of days to hear all of these smart people thinking about how institutions can shift and bend to accommodate live performance and its demands. Frankly, I was thrilled yesterday just to hear Sabina in her keynote address say the word choreography multiple times. And of course, she wasn't always referring to dance choreography, but the choreography of the museum or the exhibition hall. And that was even more satisfying to hear the word used in that context. Choreography as strategy, as a structure for communication, as an envelope that holds experience. So I haven't officially met you, but thank you for your wisdom on that subject. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to respond to what Ralph has so generously offered us here. And there are numerous points of entry. I have chosen just a few words or phrases to respond to, and in this sense I am adhering more to the definition of responding that is long held in the improvisational dance world, where you receive through the mind, body, and impulse. You select from its many possibilities the ones that resonate and which you can filter through your own knowledge and experience, and you let them out again, either transformed or just slightly permutated. There is another more academic version of responding which would involve a fleshing out of the historical context of the subject matter, but I'm not a historian, so you're not going to get that from me. And no slides. The screen will remain dark. But these are short, just a couple of words I'm choosing to respond to. First, I want to go down this alleyway of right space and contemplate whether space matters. To ask the question again that Ralph asks rather rhetorically, does it matter where these things, these art things that we need to do, does it matter where they happen? I am struck by just how much it seems to matter lately. Like there is a giant game of musical chairs going on in the art world. Everyone rushing in a circle looking for an alternative seat, trying to find some way to disrupt the convention of how they think about space. Dancers and performers want to get off the stage and feel a different proximity to the viewer. We want to share the kinetic thrill of movement, the almost autoerotic pleasure of it in a much more intimate way. We want to erase the gulf of the orchestra pit and the frame of the proscenium and get into a more conversational mode. Visual artists are likewise looking to break the wall of the gallery and extend into the streets. There is nothing new here, of course, except perhaps the acknowledgement of larger cultural institutions that this is the way to revitalize their viewership and to connect with a public that is not trained or likely to be trained to appreciate the sacred chambers of art as they have existed for so many years. So space and place are things that matter. Bringing the conversation into the horizontal instead of the vertical plane is a zeitgeist that seems to be everywhere at the moment. As Ralph puts it, artists are wanting to share some emotional weather, not stand under a separate umbrella from the viewer, but to mix it up. Secondly, I want to respond to the muse place, specifically the museum as muse place. This phrase stopped me, and I felt a need to clarify it to myself. What is it about muse that I resist so vigorously? After all, a muse is a guiding spirit, a source of inspiration, and to muse is to be absorbed in one's thoughts, to engage in meditation, all good things. But something about a muse place implies a privilege, a kind of sanctum that is offered only to the anointed few. It unsettles me in the same way that the genius moniker does, which begs the question of, what is the purpose of the museum then, if not a place for us to observe the musings of geniuses? I'm going to digress here into a short little anecdote. In 2007, I made the journey to Kassel, Germany to see Documenta 12. I wanted to see this great event that featured artworks from all over the world. I was delighted when I got there to see there were small, intimate works from artists I had never heard of, building after building full of them, way too many to absorb in a very deep way. And then I discovered that there were some works of Trisha Brown being shown. I somehow managed to ascertain the schedule and the location and discovered reenactments of older works. Floor of the Forest from 1970 and Accumulation 1971. I expected to feel the comfort of the familiar, but what I felt instead was that the works felt cramped in the spaces they were assigned to, and the performance of accumulation in particular felt like it was trying to turn the gallery space into a stage or a studio. Except that from where I was and anywhere I wanted to be, I couldn't get a clear view of what was going on because of the crowds. And I thought, is this the way the museum world has decided to include dance? That it become a sort of living archive? It felt pale and impersonal and completely different from the intimate small works I was encountering in all the other spaces. On that same trip, I stopped in Frankfurt to visit a friend, excuse me, and one Tuesday afternoon while he was at work, I decided to pass a few hours by strolling through the Moderne Kunst downtown. As I entered one of the larger gallery spaces, I realized that it was completely empty, and I decided to just walk through to the set of doors on the other side. Before I could get through the room, a tall, dour-looking man in a guard's uniform came barreling towards me, and right after him was a short, stout, Truman Capote-looking guard, and then a third young hippie dude guard. All three of them encircled me and started to do a little dance, flapping their arms up and down and chanting, "This is so contemporary! This is so contemporary!" I was stunned and terrified. And for one surreal moment, I somehow felt I was personally being called out and accused of being someone who could stroll through a museum with his arms folded on a Tuesday. I was the effete, the connoisseur, the enemy of engagement and presence. I felt nailed and truly frightened. I wanted to call the police, but wait, they were the police. Much later, after doing a considerable amount of sleuthing, I discovered that this was the work of an artist named Tino Sehgal, and that I had been the unwitting victim to a true museum intervention. It left me wondering, can performance work in any other way in this museum setting? Is anything other than an interventionist approach likely to overcome the temptations of the muse place? I think we have learned from Ralph today that there are other ways, that performing artists will find a way to work through it with the help of open-minded curators. I know that I am looking forward to seeing this new epoch in Ralph Lemon's work and watching it evolve. Thank you all very much.